All right.
Okay.
Well, welcome to the Positive Alteration School Podcast, where we delve into the transformative power of communication and public speaking. And what we do is to explore how these skills can elevate business leaders, individuals around the world, and move them to new heights. I'm your host. My name is Stallone-Obaraemi Samuel, and today we have a truly remarkable guest with us. Joining us is Gerry Dunn. Now, Gerry is an experienced director with a distinguished history in food industry. Gerry is not just a seasoned professional; he is a master of negotiation, business planning, mediation, coaching, and team building. His extensive expertise and insightful perspectives today make him an invaluable resource for anyone looking to enhance their leadership capabilities. So, in this episode, we are going to uncover Jerry's exceptional communication skills. He's a master at mediation, and we're going to see how his ability to communicate effectively have played a pivotal role in his career and how you too can learn and also harness the power of effective communication and public speaking to drive your success in your business endeavors, your personal endeavors. And so sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired by the wisdom and experiences of Gerry Dunn. So let's dive in. Gerry, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Stallone. Glad to be here.
Thank you
And
for being.
thank you for that introduction.
Jerry, I knew you were going to say that, but we're here now. So let's see what we can get out of it. Jerry, you are so passionate. When backstage or before now, when I asked you, okay, Jerry, I know you are an accomplished communicator. I have seen you. I've experienced the effect, the impact of being in your presence as a communicator. I mean, in terms of speaking in public, fun, and all of that. But there's one thing that you are very passionate about, and that is mediation and conflict resolution. So, my first question to you, so that we all can learn, is can you explain what mediation is and how it differs from other forms of conflict resolution?
Well, maybe I can just preview that by telling you how I got into it because it came out of a business situation,
Okay, that's
and
beautiful.
this was a customer that we had. We thought we'd done a good job for the customer. She disagreed, so she wasn't paying the bill, and obviously in that situation, your first idea is to get lawyers involved. But I thought by the time we paid for the lawyer, the money that she owed us would have been swallowed up anyway. So I contacted, not sure how I heard of them, but I contacted somebody that I think I went to a talk about mediation. I
Mm,
contacted somebody and to see if we could try mediation as a way of getting through this problem.
okay.
As it happened, it didn't work. But in the process, I became interested in the subject, trained as a mediator, and I've actually been working as a mediator for the sheriff courts in Scotland for about 12 years now.
Okay.
And actually, that mediation training gave me a big insight, not only into conflict resolution, but the first cousin of mediation is negotiation. And of course, in my own work in business, negotiation is always important. And so I think the mediation training gave me a big insight into negotiation in terms of something that we always try and foster in mediation, and that is getting the parties to walk in the other person's shoes. So if
Mm,
we can get in mediation, if you can get the parties who are in dispute to see things from the other side, you're halfway there. And in business, if you can, if you're negotiating with somebody and you can put yourself in their shoes and find out what they want, then it gives you a better insight, because sometimes, and particularly in the political atmosphere that we have at the moment, we think that everything's a zero-sum game. I absolutely don't agree with that. And there is a famous story that's told of two sisters. I don't know why they were girls, but that's the way I heard it.
Okay.
Who were fighting over an orange. And there was only one orange in the house. They both wanted it. They couldn't agree. And of course, eventually, they had to find a way around it. So they decided to take half each. And then, of course, they weren't on good terms. Later on in the day, one of them asked the other, "Why did you want the orange anyway?" And her sister said, "Well, I wanted the orange because I just wanted a juice drink. So I got a smaller drink than I wanted. But why did you want the orange?" And she said, "Oh, I wanted the peel because I wanted to make a cake. And the recipe called for orange peel." So if they could only have had the discussion and found out what the other side wanted, they could have had everything they wanted.
Yeah.
So sometimes, of course, sometimes compromise is the solution, but often the solution lies somewhere else. But getting to see things from the other person's point of view is always the first step.
Yeah. What a beautiful opening we've had. I told you folks, Gerry is the bomb. You've told us a couple of stories, and I'm beginning to think that by the end of today's session or episode, some people would begin to think about taking some form of executive course in mediation and conflict resolution.
Well, I would, because I know that this is not about Toastmasters, but I do some work in this regard for Toastmasters, and in the course of that, a little bit of research that apparently, and some research has been done in this, that worldwide, the average amount of time that people spend in dispute or conflict is just over 2 hours per week.
2 hours per week.
2 hours per week, in dispute or conflict. And if you could convert that to money, it's approximately 300 billion pounds that could be added to productivity.
300 billion pounds.
Yes, this is to the global economy. Obviously, the Americans are the most disputatious, but even as an average throughout the world, people are spending 2 hours per week. And, that's, as well as not, I guess some people like it, but most people don't like it. And they're not doing the work that is actually producing. So if we could eliminate that, or eliminate half of that, that would be a massive benefit, just financially.
Yeah.
I think in terms of human happiness.
Yeah, because I think you already inadvertently answered the next question I was going to ask you. Well, yes, I was going to ask you, what are the benefits of mediation in a corporate setting? I think you've given us one, which is, you've given us two actually. It saves money.
Yep.
It increases happiness. And in your the answer to the first question I asked is something you said, if only we can try to walk in the other person's shoes. Somebody said not just walk in the person's shoes, at least walk a mile in the person's shoes.
Exactly.
Then maybe things will change.
And some leaders, some business leaders, some political leaders try and, you've heard the expression divide and rule.
Mm-hmm.
They try to reinforce their own position by encouraging the people who they're supposed to be leading to actually be in conflict. Obviously, you'd expect me to say this. That is, for me, that is poor leadership.
True. I agree with you 100%. So we're talking about the benefit of mediation. But I want to ask before we get to mediation, more often than not, it's a conflict is what gives rise to negotiation, mediation, and all of that. So my question at this point would be, what are some of the common conflicts that arise in the workplace? And how can mediation help to resolve some of this? I know you've touched that, but I'm bringing you back to what are some of the reasons for which we could have conflict in the workplace, the business place, wherever we find ourselves. But
Well,
I like to use the corporate setting.
yeah. So I think that you, I think you kind of got to work out what a conflict actually is. So sometimes people say, "Oh, I'm conflicted." I've been offered a new job, but I really like the people I'm working. That's not a conflict. That is you trying to decide for yourself something you should do. So you need two people, two parties. You need two parties to have a conflict. So an internal conflict is not. Also, a disagreement, an honest disagreement between two people or two groups, that is not a conflict, and it can actually be creative. If these
Okay.
people are genuinely trying to find the best route forward, perhaps for the business or the enterprise, then that is something that can result in something positive.
Hmm.
The other thing is, if you just don't like somebody, that's not a conflict. If you think about successful sports teams, but this is true in business as well,
Hmm.
it's quite feasible for people not to get on personally, but still to be producing for the project, whatever
Okay,
project.
so Jerry, I'll hold you there. I just hold on so we don't lose this one. If you do not like somebody at your place of work, it does not necessarily
Not
mean
necessarily, not necessarily.
conflict. Could you
Yeah.
please explain a little bit?
Well, you come up against we all come up against people, and they're just not your kind of person. These are not the people that you'd like to meet after work or the weekend, but you might be able to respect them
Yeah.
as somebody who's producing for the business, say.
True.
Um, so, but when it becomes, but of course, if that is an ingredient in something else, so um, where you can get conflict is if two people, two parties need each other. So there's some independence. So I can't do my work because you, Stallone, are obstructing me.
Okay.
Then that is a barrier which can certainly be part of a conflict.
Okay.
And then if you throw in this other spicy ingredient of blaming, I go to the boss and say, this would all be fine if it wasn't for Stallone. He is blocking me. And then you get to hear about it and you're angry because maybe you didn't realize that, or whatever, or you feel that I'm blocking you. So independence, blame, these are interdependent. So when people need each other,
Mm.
but either accidentally or deliberately, they're preventing something that they want to do. Then this is starting to look a bit more like a conflict. Of course, if that is then leading to problems for the business, then you've got a situation that needs to be resolved. And of course,
Okay.
that thing that we said was not necessarily a reason for conflict. Dislike. If you have that as well with these other factors, then that makes the situation all the more difficult.
Mm. So to chisel this out, I don't like Jerry. He's not my kind of person. Jerry doesn't like Stallone, but Stallone does his job and Jerry does his job, and we produce the result we're supposed to produce in the organization. Stallone respects Jerry. Jerry respects Stallone. There will be no conflict, even if they don't like each other. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. But there's a likelihood of conflict when what Stallone does, deliberately or inadvertently, gets in the way of Gerry producing his result, and for some reason Gerry is unable to shake that off, then this might lead to conflict.
Indeed,
Okay.
might even generate a conflict itself. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, so just so that we get that beat out, so people, whoever watches this later on, understands conflict's not about I don't like you, you don't like me, but there's a lot more. So I want to ask you, as a mediator, as an experienced, accomplished mediator, 12 years with the sheriff court, I want to ask you, okay, how do I frame this now? So what are some of the biggest challenges that mediators face, and how can they overcome that?
Well, uh, one thing that to be absolutely honest, when we get the papers for mediation, we we shouldn't prejudge. We shouldn't prejudge. We should just wait till the parties are together and hear their stories. But if I hear that two parties know each other well, maybe family members, I'm very wary, because
Okay.
when you throw in that interpersonal um, dimension, that can make things worse, because that personal relationship. I know I said that disliking somebody is not necessarily a reason for conflict, but if it's in there as well, and there's a personal, I mean, you often get some conflict with people who used to be friends,
Okay.
and then some dispute has come up, and it makes the complication. Whereas if perhaps they've got third party people attending the mediation for them, that can make it easier, because you don't have that human emotion. So the human emotion can make things more complicated.
Hmm. Okay, so emotions really they act as spices.
Yeah, absolutely. It can,
So they make it a bit more
so
complicated.
quite often we get disputes between neighbours. That comes up in the sheriff court. So maybe these are people that were friends, and then maybe there was a leak, or something that happened, and the neighbours are no longer friends, and the fact that they used to be actually makes it harder to move on to
Yeah.
the stage.
Okay. In the work that I do, I more often than not, I deal with senior business executives, entrepreneurs, team leaders. And so now that I have the chance to speak with you, and I hope that others might learn from this, Jerry, I'm gonna let's say, how can senior executives use mediation? I mean, in your experience, how can they use mediation or the more mediation technique to foster a more collaborative and harmonious work environment? And I say this from the point of view of understanding how much money, if you can quantify it, that can get lost and we can lose as a business if the environment is toxic and people are struggling to get by. But how can a senior executive, a team lead, because in some cases that I have been part of, it boils down to the fact that the team lead is unable, is either not trained or is disinterested in trying to create an environment. In some cases, they might be interested in creating an enabling environment, but they're just not equipped. And you find businesses that are so focused on investing in operational capabilities, but not in other, what some people will call soft skills, but I call essential skills like communication, mediation, negotiation, and all of that. So that brings me back. Now that I've laid the background, brings me back to the question: how can senior executives use mediation techniques to foster a more collaborative and harmonious work environment?
Well, let's roll back just 1 second, because you said what is the most challenging thing, and I talked about the emotion, but there is another one which
Okay.
is such a challenge. If you can't get over it, you won't find a resolution, and that is getting the parties to want to come to an agreement. So if one or other of the parties doesn't want to reach a resolution, then really there's not much you can
Okay.
do as a mediator.
Okay.
But in terms of a business leader, we did speak earlier about business leaders that either deliberately and inadvertently fostered an atmosphere of conflict among the people that they're supposed to be leading because they think in some way that might be creative. That's I would say that's a dangerous possibility.
Mm-hmm.
So let me tell you about something about two colleagues who both of whom I respected, and let's say, and they were in two different parts of the business, and I think a lot of business people will recognize this. So on the one hand, we had John, not his real name,
Okay.
who was in charge of production, and he was measured on the number of units that we could get out in a week. So obviously, that's what he was focused on. On the other hand, we had Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
She was quality and technical. So she was focused on every unit that we produced being of the right quality. Also
Okay.
important. That's what she was measured on. That's what she was focused on. And we were dealing with supermarkets, so of course, if you put out some product that's not to the right standard, you might find it coming back.
Mm.
But Sharon's daughter also came to work with us in the business. Linda, no real names here,
Yeah,
and
no.
she worked for John actually in production.
That's Sharon's daughter works for John.
Yeah, that's right. So
Okay.
so they were all very close, all very friendly. But then I don't know whether young Linda, made a mistake, and John. So there was always some tension because John wanted to get as many units out, and if there was something was borderline, there would often be a discussion.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, they got on very well. But then John and Linda made a mistake, and John was harsh in criticizing her. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, Linda's mom, Sharon, then took exception to this on behalf of her daughter.
Yeah.
And so we had two absolutely key people in the business um,
Conflicted.
not getting on, and this was potentially a big problem for the business because remember, there was a natural tension there sometimes between the. Obviously, you want 100% of the goods to be high quality, but sometimes something was, could be acceptable, but not. And but then you got this personal dispute between them,
Yeah.
which was not only bad for business, but affected the whole atmosphere among the senior team. But
Mm-hmm.
we managed to get them into a room together and work out those problems and see things from the other point of view. I mean, this
Right.
didn't happen overnight. It took a few days, but it's something I remember. And but they both, because they did value the relationship they'd had,
Yeah, I was
and
privy to that.
things that have been said, difficult to unsay them, but they did manage to reach an understanding, and within a few weeks things were back to normal. But there was a
Mm.
situation that and I would say that if the atmosphere in the building is toxic,
Yeah.
and and in a number of business it is, but personally in my business career, particularly when I got to a senior position, if I felt that atmosphere, this was an uncomfortable place to work. And I think people, they have to come to work. It's what they do every day.
True.
But if they're not enjoying it, if they're starting to dread coming to work, I don't think you're going to get the best productivity out of them. That's my view.
Exactly. Exactly.
And
See,
if you're
that's.
not doing that, then it does translate into money.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to take each case in its merits. So I couldn't put a figure on it for every dispute, but that was, and of course, Sharon in her case, she could say if there was even even 1 unit slightly off, she could say, "Well, I'm holding the whole batch."
Okay.
If that was the mood of her, that's what she could do. So if everybody can work together,
Yeah.
you get a much better result.
True. 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 So take this back. The parties need to be willing. They have to be willing to talk. They have to be willing to resolve this. In the case that you shared, Sharon and John, not real names, they valued their relationship even before work, and still were willing to
Yes, they
talk.
did.
All
They
right,
did.
it's a good lesson. I hope that we're all going to learn as business leaders. So it brings me to everything you've talked about: negotiation, mediation, conflict resolution. In my mind, they all hang on a bridge, and that bridge is communication, effective communication. So, how can effective communication prevent conflict and misunderstandings in the workplace? I know, and you've touched in bits and pieces, but let's narrow it down so that uh, our audience can benefit from this.
Well, communication was at the heart. If we go back to that situation,
Mm,
communication was at the heart of it, because John just thought that he was telling his junior that she'd made a mistake, and it should never happen again. But
mm-hmm.
but his colleague was personally hurt by that, thought that he'd overreacted, and it was only when we managed to get them together that they were able to share their true feelings about this. So this was an emotional dispute rather than a technical dispute, and only through communication could they understand the position of the other. And so that's where communication is absolutely vital.
Yeah, I think most. I think Jerry, quickly jumping in there. I think two things that I want to highlight. I think that most conflicts are emotion that are driven by emotion than even a logic. And so you're right on point when you said it was about emotion. And again, communication is powerful because when people act, what we experience, the outward experience that we get, is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a whole lot that's happening beneath that's causing them to probably act the way they're acting. And if we effective and patient communication can help us to get to the bottom. In the case that the story that you just told us, Sharon wouldn't have probably reacted the way she reacted towards John's chastising her daughter if she had no prior or deeper relationship with her
Yes,
daughter Linda.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And if we take that, excuse me, if we take that to
Yeah.
the cousin of mediation negotiation, I'm
Mm,
thinking of customers that I dealt with, and the normal, I would say, the myth or the a common error in negotiation is you think it's about the money.
mm,
Sometimes it's not about the money. We had a customer, a big customer, and we if you're dealing in large numbers, just a fraction of a penny can make a difference. And obviously, if we were and this customer wanted open book, so we had to show what all our costs were, and then the customer, the buying person from the customer changed, and a new person came in, and she contacted
sorry. Yeah.
she contacted my colleague and said, I have got a spreadsheet that I always use with my suppliers, and I want you to use this spreadsheet as well. And my colleague said, "Oh no, this is a disaster. She's going to round down the part pennies, and then we're going to get less money for our product." And And I said, well, maybe not. Maybe she's just wedded to this particular system.
Mm.
And so why not embrace it and see where it goes? And in fact, the spreadsheet we'd used was just a black and white, nothing fancy about it, whereas hers was color coded and looked great. And so he said, "Oh yeah, I really like the look of it. I'm more than happy to use your spreadsheet." She said, "Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, we can use your numbers. I don't mind about that." So here was a case where we were worried about the finance.
Yeah.
He was worried about using her system.
Mm-hmm.
And this is another case where it's not necessarily, we don't necessarily understand what our co-negotiator is looking for.
Yeah.
So if you can communicate and find out what they want, you're in a much better position.
But Jerry, why are we so afraid of communicating? And I'm talking even to myself. It's just, why are we afraid to have these conversations? Why are we afraid at a senior level? Even it goes across, but I'm focused on decision makers. Why is it a challenge to have, I would say, those difficult conversations? Do you have, would you like to share, like, why, when we know that sometimes all we have to do is have those conversations openly and we see clearly what the other person is probably thinking and we see a way forward?
Well, sometimes, and often, this makes a good story. We think that a secret gives us
Mm.
power. We think that a lack of transparency, that if we know something that the other person doesn't know, that is better for us.
Is that true?
Maybe it's not. No, maybe it's not true. Maybe it's not true. So in that case, we didn't want to share everything. In fact, the customer wasn't that interested in the things that we thought were an important secret. So sometimes we think that, and a lot of businesses, they think that if they share the information about the company with their workforce,
Mm-hmm.
if the company is doing okay, the workforce will say, "Well, we should be getting more money."
Yeah.
So often in business, people in business like to keep a secret, and sometimes, of course, you have to. If there's a confidential thing, perhaps a business arrangement going on, that is important. But I think there's scope for more transparency.
Mm.
But not everybody is comfortable with that.
It's no, not everyone is comfortable. You're so right on point. You're right on point. Sometimes we think that when we hold something, everybody feels. Sometimes most of us feel we're powerful when we know something that the others do
And of
not.
course, the other side of it is, if the company is going through a bad time,
Okay.
if we let our colleagues know about this, then there'll be panic because they think the business is going under. So,
Mm.
I think there's a tendency to keep things known only to the senior management. But of course, if it comes out later, or if it
Mm.
comes out in dribs and drabs or through rumor,
Yeah.
that is more damaging for the business. So I think sharing as much information as you can is a good thing. You can't share everything, but as much as you can is a good thing.
Okay. Now, Jerry, I want to pull. I want to draw. I want to pull this. I want to stretch this a little bit. When we talk about communication, mediation, and all of what we said, mediation, conflict resolution, negotiation, they all come down to your ability to communicate effectively. Now,
Very
when we
much.
talk about communication, it's wide. Some people can talk to people one to one. Some people can, normal chats could happen. But when it has to do with public speaking, speaking to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 persons, that it becomes a challenge. Now, I don't know, but I'm willing to put this to some discussion. I've got my thoughts, but I want to hear your thoughts. How can public speaking in particular, now we're not talking about a broad sense of communication, we're talking about how can public speaking skills, because I've been in your space several times and you are an amazing public speaker. I'm sure these skills have come to play in the course of you in your leadership as a business director, as a corporate director, and as a mediator for years. So how can public speaking skills enhance an executive's ability to mediate conflicts effectively?
Well, I think so. Mediation is almost certainly not carried out in the public domain. It's normally with a very maybe just with two people. So no, mediation is normally a very closed group. Public speaking, of course, you want it to be as many people as possible.
Yeah.
But what public speaking does is gets you to focus on the message you want to get across. So if you are a party in a mediation or a negotiation, you have to think about what is really important to you. And if you're a
Mm,
mediator and you've done a bit of public speaking, you will be interested in two things: what your audience is really interested in,
mhm.
and what is the message that you want to get across. So,
Okay.
so public speaking, I mean, they are different things, but one of the things when we are training as mediators, we're encouraged, and if you're a curious person, or a nosy bee, as I've been accused of, this is actually a positive thing because you're trying to find out. So as public speakers, we often ask questions of our audience to find out what's important to them. And in mediation, finding out what's important to the parties involved is absolutely crucial. Because remember, we're trying to get them each to see things from the other point of view.
Mm,
So, as public speakers, I think often we're trying to get people to see things in a different way. So there is a link between the two. So if you and you know that, well, two things you probably know if you've attended a lot of business presentations, that's a low bar.
yeah.
Low bar. People looking at the screen, reading a PowerPoint presentation, that's a low bar. But you've also been at ones where you came out and said to yourself, "I've never thought of it that way." That was
True.
that was a good speaker. He said, "I never thought of it that way." And and if you are with two parties in a mediation and you can get them to see things in a way, particularly in this dispute, to see it in a way that they haven't seen it before, then that's going to be a big step on the road to getting it resolved.
Okay. Thank you very much for weaving that so beautifully. We're talking about business leaders, and conflict is part of it. I remember back in the day, one of my mentors would say, Stallone, as you build your business, you need to, apart from keeping some money somewhere for conflict resolution, he said you have to do some form of emotional banking because conflicts will come. When they come, how you respond does matter. If you're not prepared emotionally to act in a level headed way, that's my interpretation over the years. But I still remember the basic, what would I say, the basic insight he gave to me at the point in time. So, as business leaders, it's a welcome. But now that we're in this space talking about business leaders, and then we're also talking about public speaking, when conflicts erupt, when we don't agree, and there's a disconnect between the leadership and the other people who are maybe at the line managers level or even beneath, below the line managers, they see, in most cases, they see the organization from a completely different point of view, and they get to talk to the line managers. So the line managers are already leaders in their own right, and the line managers talk to senior management, and the senior managers, in many cases, see the business from a visionary point, from a strategic, from a bigger point that these other guys don't see. How can public speaking help these people, the managers in the middle, or even the senior managers, to effectively manage that situation? Whether we like it or not, what we tell people and how we tell them what we tell them really does matter. So, I hope I'm not modeling this whole thing. I'm not just mixing those whole thing, but I'm wanting
No,
to get to the
it's not
point where
tricky.
we see what's the place? What the public speaking skills? How can they help us in situations like that?
Well, it goes back to the situation. So, of course, often conflicts arise if a business is going through a period of change.
Okay.
And maybe the company is changing from survival mode to thriving mode,
Mm.
and there's perhaps a new vision for the company. Now, there's two ways. Seems to me there's two ways for the senior management to do this. They can get the line managers in and say, "This is what we want you to do, so now get on with it," or they can bring them in and say, "We're making some changes. It's a good thing, but this is the new vision for the company. This is where we're going, and it's important that we all understand why we're going in this particular direction. Maybe it means we have to drop some customers that we worked with for a number of years, but we're focusing on this group. So some difficult times, maybe some personal relationships that
Mm.
are not going to continue, but there is a reason for this, and so we're asking you all to work with it. So it may not be public speaking to a big group, but your line managers are absolutely key in delivering your message and your vision for the company. So I think that sometimes the directive just comes down from on high. This is the way we're going to do it. In fact, as you know, I have a part-time job at the moment, and sometimes we're just told that we're making this change, and no, we're part of an absolutely global organization. We're not. We're just given the directive, not brought in for the uh, an explanation of why we're going in a certain direction. We're not given perhaps a target of what it's going to look like when it's successful, but we just have to get on with it. So I think if you can include your line managers in the project and don't just tell them what they have to do, but why they should do it and how it's going to be better in the longer term, then you've got a much better chance of getting a positive result from that situation than you would have had.
Yeah, true.
You don't do that, you might get somebody say, "Well, we've been told to do it, so we'll have to get on with it." Somebody else has said, "Why? Why? It's worked reasonably well before. Why should we do that? And I've never
True.
liked you anyway."
Yes, completely. I agree. I agree with you. And to really even uh, still go in this line of what you've just said, if I put myself, I figured that because I'm in the public speaking space, and then you are always conscious of, mindful of the things like how you gesticulate, how your eye contact, the tone of your voice, and what you say, the use of story. I love what you did when we started, Gerry. I fired the first question, and all you did was you fired back with a story. That's beautiful, and the story just brought it all whole out. So sometimes what I do is I try to bring in these things to my everyday conversations. And if I'm talking to people, I'm asking myself, what are my eyes telling the person? Am I concentrated? Am I looking straight? If culturally it's appropriate, am I showing that I'm deep inside here? Because those are the things, the skills that public speaking would teach you, and what's my body language telling the other person? And so if we take back even to the corporate world, and I have to pass a difficult message across because the top management said we're going in this direction, and I'm going to talk to my team. Before I get there, I need to get myself immersed in the message. I understand that it's my job to pass the message, not to tell lies, but to pass the message in a suitable way to get the desired result. It does not mean you will always get the desired result, but would you go back and ask yourself, in terms of my communication, did I communicate well? Did I communicate strong? Did I pass the message well, or the message lost along the line? See, and the reason I'm bringing this in, so before you go on, Gerry, is my experience. In my experience, I see when we talk about public speaking, people more often than not think about people that standing on the stage, on the pulpit, and then talking to a large number of people. But when I have the chance, what I try to do is get people to say, listen, those skills, you can bring them to your everyday conversations, to the office, even in the family. It is just that you can either you can shrink the size of the application, or you can expand it depending on the number of people you're talking to or the situation you find yourself. What do you think, Jerry?
Well, I think that, whether it's 4 people or 40 people, and this is what body language and eye contact is relates to.
Mm.
Even if it's a difficult time, you have to believe what you're telling people, and they have to believe that you believe. Because if you're looking down at the ground or hands in your pockets,
Mhm.
people will say, well, maybe at some level, people say, well, he doesn't believe it. Why should we believe it?
True.
So this is about getting, however many people it is about getting your message across. And sometimes that will be very difficult. There's a quote that I do love. I heard it from a football manager. Leadership is what we do when we don't know what to do. I mean, when the situations are easy and you're just following protocol, but sometimes you get things, what do we do now?
It's,
And that's when the leaders have to come to the fore, and maybe they can say, I've been in this situation before, this is what we did then, I think this will work again. But really, as Ted Corcoran often says, if you think you're a leader but nobody's following, you're just out for a walk.
yeah.
So when you have that message to get across, your audience, whether it's an audience of 2 or 200, they have to feel that you believe it, and then they're more likely to believe it.
Yeah. I love that one. Leadership is what we do when we do not know what to do. Ah, that's when we explode. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And we hide behind the statement, I don't know what to do. But staying calm, well, that's really strong. I mean, some might not pick it. Leadership is what we do when we don't know what to do. Whoa, that is really key. In my journey, and the course of my journey and interacting with people, I think I mentioned this at some point in the course of our conversation. Managers, business owners are quick to spend or to invest in tools for operations, tools for that. I told a business owner the other day, I said, we're talking about communication, and I could see from his body language, it's not something that we're doing well operationally. And I told him, I said, without communication, really, you would have no business, because you need to market, you need to sell to get business so that you can execute in terms of operations. And no, some might argue, well, it depends on the business you're in. Some businesses you don't need to market. It's fine. But if you have now, my argument further is, if you have operations ongoing and you have a system, a model of operation, you've got to communicate how the model works so that everybody along the line understands that my actions affect B, B's action affects C. This is what I need to do if something goes wrong. It's all communication. And
Absolutely.
when yeah, you wanted to say something?
No, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with you.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And then when you have two, three, four, five people working, there will be conflict along the line, disagreements that might degenerate. Disagreements do not necessarily mean conflict from what you've taught me
Correct.
today,
Yeah.
but they could degenerate depending on the spices you have in the mix. They could degenerate into conflict. But when that happens, before it degenerates, what do we need to do? Communication comes in. If it gets to that point, what do we do to resolve it? That's why we have the expression conflict resolution. But even before we get to that point, how do we mediate? How do we negotiate? And I'm saying, talking with you right now, Jerry, I'm saying, how can business leaders just not see the importance of communication and investing in their leadership, understanding how to understand better how to communicate? I struggle to get that. Why not all, but many business leaders don't intentionally. see that as a need. You get what I'm saying? So I struggle with that. But we have limited time, Gerry. So I want to ask you, I will feel so bad if I don't ask you this question. What is something surprising or unexpected that you have learned about yourself through the course of your career?
Well,
You didn't see that coming.
we can all. I mean, I'm older than you, Stallone. One thing that I've learned quite recently, you can always learn, and you always need to learn.
Mm,
So no matter how long you've been doing anything, there's always an opportunity to do it better.
true.
So, every not maybe not every day, but on regular occasions, you realize I can. And I don't know in your public speaking, you may find, I certainly find this, that after I've made a speech, I sit down and think, I wish I'd said that. That would have
Yeah.
been better. So, and of course, we have situations in our own life, and you think back on them and say, that was the wrong thing to say, or I could have done that.
Gerry, sorry. Have you ever made mistakes on stage? I mean, you're speaking and then you just go blank. Something happens.
Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. You
How
always,
did you manage it?
well, you know that I think you just have to go with the flow.
Okay.
And you know that you went from a time where you used notes
True.
to the moment where you stopped using notes.
Yeah.
So what you lost was delivering the exact form of words that you'd planned beforehand.
Yes.
What you gained was you were able to look at the audience right in the eye,
Hmm.
and that gave you a better contact, even if all the words weren't right.
True.
And of
True.
course, then if you lose your train of thought, you have to try and go past, and it seems like an eternity till you find the next word that you have to say. But yes, it absolutely happened to me in quite a high level contest on one occasion.
Mm.
Eventually, and it was the last line, so that was a bit unfortunate. But um, in the end, it works out, and it seems like an eternity to you, but it's probably only a couple of seconds.
True.
But
When
uh,
you
but
when you
in
lose
that
your train
moment, you
of
say,
thought.
"Oh my goodness me, what am I going to say now?"
True. So, Gerry, before we go, Gerry, if you could have dinner with any three public speakers, mediators, negotiators, leaders, dead or alive, who would that be and why?
Well, there is a guy whose book I read, and I try and take some of his ideas. As much in negotiation as in needing, when I was more involved in that. His name is Stuart Diamond. He wrote
Okay.
that book, so he's not particularly well known, but a very experienced negotiator. His book is called Getting More, and it's very much in this idea that unless you understand what the other person wants, you
Yeah.
won't necessarily be. So I think he would be an interesting character.
Okay.
In terms of other public speakers, well, I think Barack Obama was pretty good.
Okay.
Uh, you know, and he would have had to have a lot of negotiating experience,
Mm.
and maybe somebody not necessarily an individual person, but in the police service they have hostage negotiators that
Okay.
have to work in situations which are very difficult. So Barack Obama, Stuart Diamond, and a hostage negotiator. That would be an interesting dinner, I think.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, yeah, Gerry, before you go, do you by any chance are you open to if you have organizations or people who'd love to learn a lot more about negotiation, conflict resolution within their space? Would you be open to help them out in some ways?
Oh, very much so. In fact, I'm doing a workshop And
Okay.
what I love to do, and I've done this with Toastmasters, and
Mm-hmm.
we obviously talk about negotiation, mediation in general, but we also try and get some real life situations. And every workplace, of course, is different.
Okay.
And of course, we make them hypothetical and anonymized. But if people can relate to those situations, I always think conflict is horrible to be in, but it's great fun to talk about.
Okay.
So,
All right.
so I love to do that and get those scenarios from people and see if we
Oh,
can resolve.
okay. So if people were to get across to you, Jerry, how do they get across to you? Is it via email, or would you, do you have any platform that they can get across to you?
No, I should do that, but they can get hold of me through LinkedIn or yes, by email, which
Okay.
I'm happy to share with you in the interest of transparency.
Okay, that's fine. So what's going to happen is after this, I'm going to get across, and then let's see if we can set up something through which people can get across to you, because I think we need to help in forging a world where we can stop problems before they erupt, or when they erupt, we can find a way to sort them out before things get too messy and people get hurt along the line. I think we can do that. Looking at what you said from the start, how much we lose when we stay in a state of conflict is against, if you can afford to say, hmm, let me walk a while, I mean a mile in your shoes, understand what you need.
Actually,
Maybe it's just you don't need the entire orange, it's just a part of it that you need, and then I can deal with that, and we
yes,
can solve a lot of this, even in marriages, relationships, in the corporate world, a whole, everywhere, in schools.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jerry. It's been a pleasure talking to you today, and I'm sure that we've learned a lot across public speaking, communication, more importantly, negotiations, and making sure that we keep the peace. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much,
All
Stallone.
right, then.
See
Yeah,
you
bye
soon.
for now.
Bye bye. Bye bye.
Yeah.